if you don't tell your story, then your life was useless. If you don't tell your story, then you were just a social security number. You were just an ID number if you don't tell your story. But when you tell your story, you write your name in history. When you tell your story, you tell the world, I was here. When you tell your story, like, may God rest his soul, Nipsey Hussle.
So the question is this: how do thought leaders, school dropouts, former and current students find out what's next after they do or don't cross that stage? If you want to know the secrets to starting the career or business of your dreams, getting paid whatever you desire, and discovering what you do the best with the least amount of effort, then this is the right podcast for you. I'm Shawn Anthony, and this is School's Over. Now What? The podcast. Welcome to School's Over, Now What? The podcast, and I'm your host, Shawn Anthony. I am first off, I want to just say this right off the jump. If you click that button, I appreciate you. You could have been anywhere. You could have been checking out any podcast, but you have decided to check out this podcast. So let me tell you a little bit about what this show is all about. You know, each and every single week, we have successfully brought you an inspiring message or person that has asked themselves the very same question of the show. And that school's over, now what? And I'm excited to say that so many students and so many people, whether they're an entrepreneur or, creating their new business or even in a career right now, have learned and gained so many knowledgeable insights from this show. And if you're here right now, you can expect nothing less. Each and every single week, I like to kick the show off with the review of the week. And this week's review of the week comes from none other than the Apple Baker. And the Apple Baker wrote, Big Brother Pep Talks. Every podcast is key to successful life. Hot fire. It's almost like Big Bro giving you a pep talk. Not just about a career, but just life in general. Work hard, stay humble, and be valuable in a way that gives back to others who need help. Looking forward to other episodes. Keep up the good work. Hey, at the Apple Baker, I appreciate you for leaving that review. And if you haven't already, it's so important that you go down to iTunes, drop down that 5-star rating, and leave your comment and your thought about the show. It helps grow the show in amazing ways. And if you're gaining anything from this content, once again, this show comes to you for no charge at all. It is absolutely free. The only thing that I ask is that you share it with a friend. So if you know somebody that needs to figure out the keys to success, or somebody that's struggling in their field, or they just got out of school and don't know what their next place should be, tell them about this show. And once you've told them about this show, make sure that you screenshot, yourself listening to the show and add me, Shawn R. Anthony _, and also add our guests. So with that being said, let me jump right into the reason you've clicked that button today. And our guest is none other than the Tony Gaskins. That's right, Tony Gaskins is on the show today. And I know you heard of this name before because you've probably seen him almost anywhere where you see an inspirational quote, or perhaps you might have seen him on Oprah, or better yet, maybe even with Tyra Banks. This guy's been everywhere. Tony Gaskins is a husband, father, a best-selling author, and an international speaker. He's also a celebrity coach and consultant. What I like so much about Tony is that this episode is going to hit you from a different angle than any of the guests that have ever been on the show. We talk about his story, his life. This guy was a former drug dealer, and now he's inspiring people by the millions. And you can do that too. So if you're listening to this show right now, you come from that type of background and where you struggled in life, your life could have went in any direction. This is an episode you are wanting to grab that pencil, grab that paper, get ready to write these things down, because he is going to bring it. And he's going to open up. And he's going to tell you, a little bit about him, his life, how he got to where he is today, and how it all started with him changing his mindset, and how you can do the very same thing. I don't want to hold you off any longer, because I promise you this is going to be like your new favorite. Ladies and gentlemen, episode 46, Respect My Story, with the Tony Gaskins. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast, and I am here with my guy, the one and only Tony Gaskins. How's it doing today, man?
Going great. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I'm excited for this one, man. You are like the guru on all things relationships. You're a well-known author, celebrity coach, man, and I'm just excited to bring you in on the show. And I kind of want to know, like, I want to go back to the beginning so people can, get an idea about you. Take us back to like where you're from.
Literally like where I grew up.
Yeah, man, let's go.
I'm from Arbondale, Florida, which is a small town in the middle of Tampa, Florida, and Orlando, Florida. It's in between the two of them. And so I just, I come from a humble beginning. Mother and father in the home. My dad was a police, then he was a fireman. My mom worked, State Farm Insurance for like 15 years. And, your typical upbringing. And then it was when I started to try to find myself and go out and look for me, that's when things started to change and go the wrong way for me.
Wow. So you say things started going the wrong way. Like you're growing up in Tampa, right? And you're growing up and learning all these different things. As you're in school, like, was there things that were catching your attention that were getting you in the wrong direction or what?
Yeah, it wasn't really in school for me. It was more so when I turned 18.
Oh, wow.
Because I got in trouble in the 9th grade, got arrested for stealing from the mall with my friend. And so we went to jail for, maybe a few hours, and my mom picked me up. Ironically, both of our dads were pastors, so my dad had a very small church and his dad had a small church in the same little city. And we just were out, doing the devil's work, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
But from there, I was pretty, clean cut until I turned 18 when I went off by myself when I went to college. And that's when, the monkey jumped on my back, so to speak.
Wow.
And it was a battle.
Man, so all right, so you had this incident that happened, you were in 9th grade, right? Like when that incident happened for you in 9th grade, like what were you feeling like after you were caught and like it was brought up and you had this, this great family background? Like how did that make you feel?
It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for my parents, especially. I mean, not as much for me because it was kind of like your stripes, so to speak. You get arrested, you go to jail. As a young black man, around that same time, a lot of guys are dropping out of school. A lot of guys are starting to sell drugs, starting to smoke, and so do different things. So for me, it was kind of like those were my little stripes, of being a bad guy, not being the spoiled kid from the good home with the 2-parent home, because most of my friends didn't have a father in the home. And so, I felt unrightfully privileged. And I think a lot of times when you're young, you don't realize your blessings. I remember asking my parents, like, can y'all not come to my football game? Like, why do y'all have to come to every game? Like, nobody else parents come. I felt I was unrightfully privileged because I had 2 parents, but being in an environment that was so many single parent homes, it was, I felt weird. I was like, Dad, you messing up my story. When I go to the NBA or the NFL, people gonna think I didn't earn it because I had a father. And it's that backwards mentality of some Black Americans in certain places throughout America, to where you become so accustomed to seeing brokenness and to seeing dysfunctional households that when you have one that is functional, you almost don't know how to, act in it.
Wow. So growing up, it sounds like, were you ever like in environments with your peers and your homeboys and they were going through hard times and struggles and you just felt like, you know what, I can't even relate because I can go home right now and see both of them?
Right. It was just kind of weird because my best friend, his dad has been in prison all our life. I don't even know what his dad is in prison for. He's never even mentioned it. So it has to be that bad, and so he was in prison our entire life. I met him when I was 5 years old and he's still in prison and we're 35.
Wow.
So I don't even know what he went to prison for. And then my other friends, didn't have their father. Or if they did, the dad was a little different than mine, maybe a little distant, didn't really come outside and play with them, teach them, stuff on the court. So it was an awkward feeling because I'm like, why am I favored? Who am I? And why do I have this situation when everybody else is kind of going through these struggles?
How did you come over that? Like, how did you get past feeling like that?
I never did as a youth. It actually made me want to do more of the wrong things because I wanted to be accepted. And I think a lot of times people who end up in the street life, we're not real about that. We're not real about that nobody is forced to the streets. Not nobody, but 90% of the people who end up in the street life made a choice.
Yeah.
It's that 10% who they were born to a mother who was strung out on drugs and a father who was absent. So they had to go out to sell drugs, to buy food, to feed themselves literally because their mom was high. That's less than 10% of the people. Most of the rest of us, you had either a strong mother or a 2-parent home, and you made a choice because you thought that was a rite of passage to becoming a man. And so that's kind of what I went through.
Wow. And so it sounds like a lot changed for you at 18 when you went off to school, right? Tell me a little bit about that. What happened?
I was on a full football scholarship, so $30,000 a year.
Wow.
And I redshirted my freshman year, which is, for those who don't do sports in college, it's a red shirt is like a free year. It doesn't count against your eligibility. And so you will technically be in school 5 years and you just practice with the team, but you don't play. And our red shirt is very, very boring. It was very boring. And I just kind of got caught up. I was used to being the man on the football field and on the basketball court all through high school, in the newspaper every day, #1 in my county. So when I went to college and now I'm not playing, I felt like nothing because it's like, where do I get my attention from? Where do I get my shine from? And I started selling weed in college, so I started selling weed because my cousins back home was selling weed in Florida. I was in college in West Virginia. So I had to get the weed in Florida, traffic it from Florida to West Virginia, and then sell it to the kids who were smoking. I didn't smoke. And so, but everybody was smoking, so I saw opportunity. And so that was kind of like the entrepreneur in me that pays off legally today. But at that time, it was like I was seeking, attention. I was attention seeking and trying to be affirmed.
Wow. So when you're out here, you're in West Virginia, you're trafficking from Florida, and you're making these sales and making these deals, did people realize it was you? And then did it get to a point where, I'm probably going to lose my college scholarship doing these type of things?
Yeah. My whole team knew it was me. And ironically, right next to me was the head coach's son. So I believe he probably told his father. And his father probably didn't want me to go to jail or anything, but it distracted me. It took some of my attention. So after 3 years, the coach kicked me off the team. I knew it was because I stayed injured, because I wasn't living right. So my father didn't play sports in high school, and he dropped out of 12th grade and took his GED. I think he didn't walk the stage. And so my mother, she graduated, but didn't really go to college. And so it was a situation to where I wasn't really prepared for college. I was basically a first generation college student and definitely, first generation athlete. Neither one of my parents played sports at all in Pop Warner, Little League, middle school, high school. So I didn't understand the level of sacrifice that it would take to be successful as a college athlete, but I had all of the physical gifts. I was the absolute most athletic on my team. And I had been that way my whole life. I was always the high scorer in basketball and I was always the leading rusher in football, but I didn't necessarily understand sports, how to be successful at it.
So you get kicked off this team, and from what I'm hearing from you right now, this had to by far be your now what moment, right?
At that time, it was like, wow, man, it's shocking. It was really shocking, and I didn't know how to process it. Tried to fight it. They let you appeal. I tried to appeal. The school came back and said, well, we take the coach's side on this. Instead of giving you the $28,000 a year that you were getting, paying your full tuition, we'll give you $14,000, and you still can come to school, but you got to pay $14,000, which of course, my parents didn't have $14,000 that they could pay. So it was time to go home and get into student loan debt.
Yeah. So student loan debt is something we all are aware of, and whether, they're calling you, whether they're asking those different type of things. So you go back home, you have the student loan debt. Like, where were you going to do next? Like, did you think, okay, I got to go get a regular job?
Right. I tried to, at first, because I went to a private school my 10th grade through 12th grade year. So I was fortunate enough. I was recruited to play basketball, which recruiting is illegal, so you can't technically, say that. But I was recruited to play basketball, and so that's how I got to the private school. And then they have financial aid there, so my school was paid for in high school. And I met some, high-powered individuals. And so when I came home, I was able to reach out to some of those connections and get some, regular jobs. And so all through college, while I was in West Virginia, I was able to work a summer job. When I was in high school, I was able to work a summer job one summer because of one of the business owners at my private school. And here I was 16 years old making $250 a week, with no bills. So I'm making $1,000 a month with no bills. And I just could spend that money how I wanted to. So I was living lavish. And so I kind of had this favor that was following me through my life. And my mom, she always says, she said, you've been favored since your feet hit the ground. And I've had this favor that followed me through my life, and I didn't really understand it. I didn't really realize its presence. And I took it for granted. And so you would think that would be my moment, getting kicked out of college, losing a full football scholarship, but I was not in love with football. I actually did not like football. I actually did not watch football on television. I just averaged 10 yards a carry. And that's what got me my scholarship. But I didn't really understand the game, to truly be honest.
What's the biggest lesson your mom ever taught you?
She said so many little nuggets to me. And every day she dropped me off to school, she would say, study to be quiet and show yourself approved. And she would always have like these different little, quotes she would say in every arena. And it would come from her mother, my grandmother. And then my dad, he was more long-winded, so that's where I get my long-windedness from. And he had a lot of wisdom, so that made me start thinking 20 years, ahead of my time. And I honestly think that was a part of my problem, because I felt like I experienced the world in a much deeper way, that the pace that my peers were moving at was very slow to me. And so that kind of made me want to do more. And I became restless and reckless, taking risk, because I felt like I had a greater command on my environment. So, the lessons that I learned really came from life, not really from my parents, because I was at that age, I wasn't listening, I wasn't paying attention. And then it just starts to hit you later,
Wow. So you go back home, right? And you obviously you continue to learn different things, but I heard you kind of took a job with counseling, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
That was a little bit later. I tried to work in the grocery store, and my ego just would not let me. I had been used. I was stocking groceries, and I was probably 21. And I'm like, man, I was used to being a ladies' man because I was an athlete.
Yeah.
And I'm in here stocking groceries, and all these beautiful girls who go to my college up the street, coming in here. And I'm stocking groceries, man. I look like, and so after about 3 months, I quit that job, And then I said, hey, can you help me get on in the warehouse? Because the grocery store have warehouses. So I went to the warehouse. So now I'm in the warehouse, and around this time I met my wife. And so now I'm in the warehouse, and it's back-breaking work. I'm like, man, you driving a forklift, and you gotta get off the forklift, grab these boxes, stack it on this pallet, on the forklift behind you.
Yeah.
And keep going through the warehouse, stacking it up like, this geometry,
Yeah.
And then you got this thing that's tall. I'm 5'10", so this thing gets 6'4", and you got wrap around it as you're doing this, and then you hit a corner and it all tip over.
Crazy.
And you've been stacking it for an hour. I say, man, I'm not built for this.
So I gotta get something else.
3 months I quit. And then that's when I went full time in the streets. And I'm like, I tried to be a pro athlete.
Wow.
I saw 3 options coming out of where I come from, small town, Arbondale, Florida. And at this time after college, I moved to Tampa, which is to me the big city. And I saw 3 options. You can be a pro athlete, because I'm from Arbondale and Tracy McGrady is from Arbondale. So I'm like, you can be a pro athlete like Tracy McGrady. That's your first option. Then you could be overworked and underpaid like your parents. You're making an honest living. I tried that, and I didn't like any of it. Or you could be a drug dealer. And so my next option was to be a drug dealer. And so I was full time in the streets, and then I met my wife.
Wow.
I had met her around the warehouse time, but then she left me like 2 months in because I was too toxic, too controlling. I was too insecure, too jealous. And she left me. And so we didn't talk for 6 months. And then come back around, we bumped into each other just on happenstance because one of my friends wanted to connect with her roommate. And I didn't try to get her back or chase her, and she didn't try to come back to me. She said, we need to take a break. And my ego at this time, very arrogant, very egotistical, like a lot of star athletes. And I kept it moving. I went back to my ex. She went back to her ex. Me and my ex stayed together for 6 months. Her and her ex, he flunked back out of the relationship after like 2 months. And so she was single, for them next 4 months. I didn't know it. And I bumped into her trying to connect her roommate with one of my friends. And that's when my life started to change.
Crazy.
At that time, I was what some guys call an organized pimp, but it wasn't really an organized pimp. What it was is I had a group of college girls who were called the Dazzling Dimes. And it was an idea from one of my friends. He was like, my best friend that I grew up with. Like, man, you got all these women, you got all these girls, man, you need to do something with it, make some money off of it. I was like, what you mean? He was like, man, you need to get like a troop of girls or something. How these women working for you? And so here I am. We started Dazzling Dimes, and it basically was girls who was like a twerk team. If you ever heard of a twerk team,
yeah,
it's a thing in the South. It's a thing in the South. So they just would go to different clubs. We would go to all the different clubs, and the promoters would put them on the stage, and while the songs playing, the top songs, T.I. or whoever, they twerking, and they got on like little boy shorts or a little skirt or something, and they had on matching shirts with a number on the back of it, and so that was another entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah.
And I made $900, I think, in that. And everything was kind of for free. And then my mom, she came to me, she said, son, you need to let that girl stuff go. You got them girls, you're in the club. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. Somebody say, how your son doing? What are you up to? Because they all know you was a star athlete and went off to college. She's like, what am I supposed to tell them? Oh, he worked with girls in the club,
Yeah.
She's like, what am I supposed to say? And so I met my wife. She went on one job with us, which was to the club, for the girls to be VIP eye candy for, pro boxer who made it and pro NBA player who made it from where we from. and we all grew up together. And so now they the pro athletes making millions, and I'm the ladies' man with the girls.
Yeah.
So I brought the girls to do the VIP eye candy. They just stand in the VIP, look pretty. And my wife went with us on that trip, and we were driving my dad's car. He had a little Lexus, and I had the girls lapped up in the back, sitting on each other's lap, because it's only seat 3. They sitting on each other's lap, and I put my wife, the queen, in the front seat.
Yeah.
And she went, saw what it was like, and then after that, she kind of told me, like, when we started to get serious, she said, look, you're going to have to let that go. And I was selling drugs at the time, and she said, you're going to have to let that go. And that's when my life started to change. She was with it for a little minute, but I think she was, as she explains it to me, if she knew the first time around that she met me that I could be her husband.
Yeah.
But when she cut me off, she had to eat that. She had to live with that decision. And when she came back, she tolerated some mess so that to give me some time to grow up.
Yep.
It was just a couple months though.
Man, it makes so much sense, man. It's so crazy because I come from that same type of background. So like at the age of 14, I started throwing all these parties, go off to college. I've been all the states, all the clubs, all the nightlife venues. We probably would have hired Tony to do something like that. So that's so real, man. We tried a girl group before. I can only imagine the different personalities you had to deal with and all of those things, man. So you get the lady of your dreams to take you out of the streets, to take you out of the mindset, to grow you up and level you up, right? What was it that for you with having that background? I noticed you talk about your father being, the guy of wisdom and things like that. How did you formulate all those things together and start taking it to social media and blow up the way that you have?
I started working in the group home in 2006, I think it was. And I got with my wife, and she got pregnant. She got pregnant. And then when she was probably 3 months pregnant, I proposed to her on Christmas. And then we got married March 30th in 2007. And Twitter had just started in 2007. I didn't know about Twitter. And I wrote a book and I published it February of 2007, got married March of 2007, turned 23 March of 2007, and we had our son April of 2007.
Wow.
So my life was going, really, really fast. And after having my son, not long after that, I got my first royalty check, and it was $300. So after trying to go legit, I get a royalty check that's $300. And I'm like, and it was for like 3 months of sales, of book sales. I was expecting that check to be $12,000 because of Amazon.com and just my ignorance of how it works.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the streets against my wife's will, without her knowledge. And when she found out, I remember her crying. She left the house. She went and get some counsel, I think from a pastor, her uncle. She came back. She had her glasses on because she wear contacts normally. She had her glasses on. Her hair was in a ponytail. Her nose was red, so I could tell she'd been crying. And I think she was just depressed. Like, wow, I'm in school to be a doctor. She was a biomedical science major. I get with this guy. I love his mind. I love everything about him. But then he addicted to this image. And he doesn't know his purpose and who he is. And so she said, I'm gone. I told you, if you're going to be in the streets, I can't be with you. So she basically was telling me, yeah, we've been married for like 3 months, but I'm going to leave you. And so she left, and she was gone for like 3 days. And I was begging her back, calling her nonstop. And then on the third day, she answered the phone. And she said, look, I'm giving you one more chance, but you're going to have to promise to leave the streets forever. You're going to have to go to anger management for trying to hold me when I was trying to leave, because she was trying to leave. I was bear hugging her, and holding her. And so we were tussling. And so she said, you're going to have to go to anger management or get some kind of life coaching, And so I started doing coaching with my father. who he wasn't a pastor at the time. He had gone through stuff in his life, and my mom had got a divorce after 25 years of marriage. And so I went to him to get the lessons that he learned from life. And I was finally receptive at 23 years old. And it was 23 years old that my life started to change, that I started to turn things around. And I set a goal to be on Oprah in 2 years. It was 2007. And I started pitching myself to Oprah every day, telling different parts of my story. And then eventually in 2009, Chris Brown and Rihanna happened. And in my relationship before my wife, we had physical altercations, not to that extent, but screaming, yelling, pushing, shoving when I was 19, 20 years old, playing college football. And I was dating a girl. She was a college soccer player. And so we was a recipe for disaster. Complete, just opposites. She believed in violence in a relationship. She believed in it. She thought that meant love. And so it later came to my knowledge from my sister. She told my sister that she loved to get under my skin and make me mad. And so she would kind of push buttons, mental abuse, and then it would turn into more. And I was in that situation for 2 years, and it was toxic for like a year. And then I left the relationship because I'm like, this is just too much. It's too toxic. It was like spiritual warfare.
Wow.
Is what it felt like. And so when I saw Chris Brown and Rihanna, I realized that was spiritual warfare, that it was two spirits having a human experience, but the spirits are opposing. And so one is trying to control the other, and they're trying to control one another. So now it becomes a tug of war and a survival of the fittest. And when you can't express yourself verbally, things get physical. And it was young. It happened for them around the same age that it happened for me.
Yeah.
I thank God it was never as bad as it got for them, but it still was the same underlying emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pitched again. I had given up on pitching myself, and I sent another pitch through Oprah.com. And I was my own publicist. So I did all my own pitches. I wrote the own pitch and everything. And I wrote it, and I said, I was Chris Brown. I know what it's like to be him, and I know how he can change, and I know how Rihanna can change, leave the relationship, and not attract another situation like that. And I told my story, a piece of it, and said, please let me come on your show and share my story with your viewers. And I was at the group home working as a counselor in the group home. And I looked at my phone and it said Chicago.
Wow.
And it was like a day after the pitch.
Oh, goodness.
And it said Chicago, and I picked it up and was like, hi, Tony, this is such and such, producer from Harpo Productions from the Oprah Winfrey Show. And I was like, what? my clients was on 24-hour supervision, but I left them in there by themselves.
It's Oprah, I'm out.
Right. And I went out the back door. And I sat there and I, took the call and I talked to her, and I was very candid. I was trying to sell myself. I was overselling myself. I was stretching the truth. I was exaggerating, trying to make it more than what it was. And man, she held me to it. She stung me with it, So the stretching of the truth that I told in that email that I wrote like a poet, I wrote it like a poet. And just kind of like poetry, it's kind of like rap too.
Yeah.
When you're writing, the words magnify the situation that may not have been on that level. And so she made me read that on air. And it wasn't the full, it made it sound much worse than what I actually went through. But I had put myself in that position, trying to find a platform to tell my story. And it was a live airing. It never aired again. It wasn't recorded, so it's not on YouTube. You can't find it online. And I think that was divine, because it was such a humiliating experience for me to to take my skeletons out of the closet. And I think a lot of times, people have these situations to where you have skeletons in the closet, and a lot of especially men and women too, but humans are afraid to bring their skeletons out of the closet. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take my skeletons out of the closet. I'm going to put clothes on them, and I'm going to send them into the field to do God's work. And so I turned my mess into my message, and I turned my pain into purpose, and I turned my mistakes into lessons. And I used my story for God's glory to show the redemption. Because I was raised a Christian, but I really didn't live it or understand it until I became an adult. And a lot of people don't believe in it and things like that, but I believe in it 100% wholeheartedly, because the lifestyle of Jesus Christ is what changed my life. Had I lived the lifestyle of, you know, Peanut and Pookie and Boo Boo and all these guys, you know, from the hood, I would be in prison or the grave. But I started living the lifestyle of Jesus Christ at 23 years old, and that's what saved my life.
Hey guys, so let me take a guess. You're enjoying the show. And if that's right, please make sure that you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast right now and tag me at ShawnRAnthony_. I promise you this is going to help in amazing ways. And while you're at it, hit the 5-star rating and subscribe. With that being said, guys, let's get back to the show. Man, that's a powerful story, man. And I think you're right, what you just did right there. There's so many people that listen to this show, listen to this podcast, that can relate to everything you said, but now they're understanding that there is a way out, and they're looking at you as the way out. And so what was it for you? When was that moment for you when you knew that, okay, I'm doing something right, I'm on the right path, and this is the direction I should go?
So after I did Oprah, they didn't mention my book or anything. The producer, she ordered my book from the independent publisher I was using, the internet publisher I was using. But they didn't mention my book. And I was in the limo with my wife going back to the hotel, and I'm sitting there and I'm like in tears pretty much. And I'm like, man, I just embarrassed myself. Everybody who knew nothing about, my past in relationships and how toxic I was, now everybody knows. And I'm sitting there and I'm like in tears, and I'm like, man, why did I do that? Like, yeah, nearly every man I know has gone through what I've gone through, but they take it to their grave. And why did I expose myself like that? And then it dropped in my spirit, email Tyra Banks' producer, because I had been in touch with them as well. But they kept trying to put me on, Monkey Sambo shows. And I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be a celebrity. I'm trying to live a life of significance. I'm not just trying to be on TV. I got to be on the show that's positive, that has a message. And so I emailed him and I said, hey, did you see me on Oprah? And he said, yeah, I did. You were amazing. He was like, we would like to bring you on Tyra's show next Tuesday. And this was a Thursday. He said, so can you get to New York? I was in Chicago, so I had to fly back to Florida. And then that next Tuesday, they flew me to New York. And he said, we want to bring you on not as just a guest, but as a featured expert with your book in hand. So here I am, 25 years old, with a self-published book full of typos and grammar errors because I didn't even finish college. And this guy telling me I'm going to be on Tyra Banks showing my self-published book that my wife invested in and paid $1,600 for me to publish. And I'm going to show this book to the world, to her millions of viewers. And I'm going to be sitting next to a doctor. And the doctor is talking about toxic, abusive relationships, domestic violence. And I'm telling my personal story of being a toxic lover in a relationship, and with a bunch of young people on the stage telling their story. And that was kind of confirmation. That was like God saying to me, I took you to the highest heights so that you can expose yourself, so that you can be humbled, so that you can assume this robe of humility and service without your ego. Because had you rolled in like the knight in shining armor, it would have been to your destruction. But because you've exposed yourself, now people know that you were a flawed individual, just like they are. And now they know what you did wrong. So now the adversary cannot ever throw that in your face. Your legacy will be written by you, because if you don't expose yourself and you try to be perfect, somebody else will have the final say so of your legacy. So every mistake I made, I put it in a book, and I told it on interviews. I told it on Oprah, and that was I didn't have the wisdom at the time. I didn't understand what they would do to Bill Cosby. I didn't understand what they would do to Michael Jackson. I didn't know that would happen, to where when a person is about to die or after they die, they take their skeletons out of the closet and they ruin their legacy. And God had given me wisdom at 25 years old, really at 22, because I wrote my story in my book, to expose myself. So it kind of was the Eminem 8 Mile tactic.
Yeah.
When he took
describe
himself in his freestyle. So now when it was dude turn, everything that dude was gonna say, he had nothing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I never forgot that either. And so now it's like nobody can say, oh, Tony was a womanizer, Tony was toxic and controlling, Tony was a drug dealer, and it's breaking news. Nobody can say that, because I've already told that story. So now what you have to get out from my story is the redeeming power of Jesus Christ. And whether you are atheist or Muslim or whatever, the proof is in the pudding. You gotta respect my story, because this is what I lived and this is how I changed. And I remember after going on Oprah and then doing local news and Tyra Banks, and then right after that I did the 700 Club. I remember seeing a counselor. She said on the local news, she was like, a lot of people say that their faith changed them, but that's an excuse. That's a cop-out. Your faith can't really change you. You got to go through counseling, and you got to go through like a program. And I just kind of laughed at it, because there was no more wisdom that I could get from a man or a woman than I couldn't get from the Holy Bible. And I started reading 2 chapters a day. I started studying. I started living by it, and it became my guide for life. And then everything in my life changed, because I had now instituted morals and values.
Wow. I mean, how important do you think it is for somebody that's listening to right now, if they're afraid to, how important do you think it is for them to tell their story?
I think it's everything, because if you don't tell your story, then your life was useless. If you don't tell your story, then you were just a social security number. You were just an ID number if you don't tell your story. But when you tell your story, you write your name in history. When you tell your story, you tell the world, I was here. When you tell your story, like, may God rest his soul, Nipsey Hussle. I was listening to his album, and it was so crazy for me, because I had started studying him, and I have what I call like study of greatness. And so as I see somebody who's greatness in the making, I start studying them. And I had started studying him about 40 days before his passing. And so it hit me so hard. And I could tell from his music and from what he was saying that most likely he's killed people. He never said it, because that would be incriminating. But I could hear in his music that it was so real. And in that, and people are losing their lives. His best friend lost his life, Steve, who they named the barbershop after. So I could tell that most likely he had killed people in his career as a gangster. Or if not killed people, at least shot them or shot at them.
100%.
That's a lot to tell. That's a lot to admit to. But in his coded language, he was saying that to the people who were in the streets who would know what he means. And then he was saying, I did what you did, and I probably did worse than what you did. But look at me today. So if I can mature, if I can change, you can mature and you can change. So I was studying that, and because of the depths of his words, I saw his untimely demise happening before it happened. And I remember when it happened, my wife, she came in, she's screaming. She was like, "Oh my goodness," because when it hit the airwaves that he crazy. She said, "Oh my goodness, you just said this. You spoke this on that man." That's what she said. That's her words. But I didn't really speak it on him because I don't have power over somebody else's life. But I had just told her that morning. That I saw that happening, because in my studies of his interviews and his music, I said he was too deep. He was in too deep. This was not somebody sitting in their bedroom with their blinds open, looking outside.
He was in that.
And stuff happening and writing it in their notepad, turning it into rhymes. This was somebody who was in it. And for me, it was a lesson. And it was a lesson on legacy. It was a lesson on turning mistakes into lessons. And it was confirmation for me from God to like keep going. Yeah. Like keep going, keep sharing your story, and make sure that you got your ducks in a row. Yeah. Make sure that you put things in place, because you never know when you're a voice, when you shift in the culture, when you shift in the atmosphere, you never know when your number will be called. You never know when the person right next to you from where you from, because of the life that you walk, because I was in the streets, because I was doing dirt, because I was out there, you never know when that's going to come back to haunt you. So make sure that every day you do your best work and that you add your voice to the world. And I was like, wow, it hit me, so hard. I was floored. I'm like, man, what's going on? And I still have not gotten over it yet. And then today they having, his funeral here in a little bit. And so it was so real for me. It was so real. And I never met the man, never shook his hand. But it was a message for me that I decided to, go harder, do more, punch the gas to the floor, and make sure that I'm living a life of significance and thinking about legacy.
Man, that's so true. I mean, that's so real. And his whole motto was the marathon continues. And I think that Victory Lap, his album which was crazy. But I think so many people now are getting hip to him. And I think he's going to be beyond bigger now, because they're going to look back, like you said, to his words and his lifestyle, and look at the bigger thought is what he wanted to do for his own people. But at the same time, he still was heavily involved and heavily around. And the sad thing about it is, as you grow up, you think about it, your goal is to get out of the hood and want to do things for the hood. But when you do things for them and things like that happen, it's just tragic, man.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I live where I ran the streets. And that's why here, where I live, nobody knows that I live here. It's a few people, and I don't do anything in the community, and I don't have a store or anything like that in the community for that very reason, because of that fear that somebody can clock you, and they can watch you, and they can schedule your demise. And so because of that fear, it's like waiting until that time to where, when you know that you are a culture shifter, everything you say and anything you say and anything you do, you gotta be ready to die. And when I say that, I don't mean being killed by the government. I mean energy moves energy. Energy shifts energy. So if you're doing positive things and you're radiating positive energy, you're stirring up negative energy in the people who despise you, in the people who envy you. And the greater you become, the greater their energy becomes. And now this is an opposing energy, and it's no different than what you see in a Marvel movie. It's no different than what you see in every comic, Superman, Batman. It's good versus evil. And a lot of times people get into conspiracies about government this and government that, but it's literally just good versus evil. It will be a human trying to hurt a human. And it may not always be death. It could be something as simple as they come and slice your tires. It could be something they start spreading lies about you to people who are mutual connections and say, oh, well, he did this and he did this, because now you're making progress and they're standing still. So even with the work that you're doing, when the Lord calls me home, and I pray that's at, 100 years old, this interview will live on. And you will be one of the few interviews that I've granted that will be added to my legacy. And people don't, think about that. So now you've become a part of my work. You've become a part of my legacy. So as great as and I use great loosely, as great as I grow to become, this interview will grow and go with me. So people will be able to place it in a chronological timeline to chart my growth. And there you will show up in that process. And now, but at the same time, you are transferring energy. So the guy who hates you from third grade, this is going to make him hate you even more. The girl who hates you because you broke her heart, your first love, she going to hate you even more. So now it's just how energy works. And if somebody is crazy enough, if they own cocaine or some type of drug, synthetic weed, if they're going through, if they got a bipolar disorder or some type of disorder that could make them go too far on the other end of the spectrum. And if they're close enough to touch you in whatever way it may be, they may do that. I had an aunt who, she was just so bitter and so hateful and so spiteful. She would call the police on people and say, hey, they're selling drugs in their house.
Wow. And
not be selling drugs and police come and raid the people's house. She would call people jobs and she would say, such and such selling drugs at your job, such and such, doing this. And people jobs would be ready to fire them.
Wow.
Calling them in to write them up and about to get them fired. And so that's what I mean. She saw people married and happy with their spouse and a new car and a new house. And this could be her own sister. This could be her own mother. I remember this aunt, she called the police on her mother who did nothing to her but try to help her. Wow. And this was a grown woman in like her 30s or 40s. And she did it to my mom, her sister. And so that's how I saw it. And I started to realize that it literally could be, when you start to pursue greatness, it could be the person in the house with you that will try to hinder you. It could be your quote unquote best friend that's jealous of you.
Yep.
And I think that's what people got to think about is step into your purpose, step into your greatness, leave a legacy, but be ready for everything that's going to come with it.
Man, this interview is iconic, man. Cause everything you said is spot on, but you gotta realize when you're going after a goal, right? And you're going after a dream. As you pursue that dream, you level up the heights. I've had a lot of people on the show, a lot of celebrities on the show. Now I'm one-on-one with you. People are going to watch what you're doing. They're going to want to either clap for you or silently hate on you. Mm-hmm. And you have to realize if that is what you're going for, you have to think about impact, value, legacy. And that's what we're doing here today. So I want to ask you the question we ask every single person that's ever been on this podcast. And that is, if you were the person that just dropped out of school, whether you're still in school right now or you graduated, you can't figure it out. And you're asking yourself the question of the show, school's over, now what? What advice would Tony give?
I would say to sit down with yourself and get in silence where no music, no TV, nobody talking to you. And if you have to do this an hour or 30 minutes every day, sit down with yourself and let your spirit minister to you to identify your purpose, to identify your pain, know that will be tied to your purpose, and identify your passion, because you may be able to marry your purpose and your passion together. And when you discover that, I had a coaching call yesterday and a lady said, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know who I want to be. She's 38 years old. And, she working at a cell phone repair place. And she live on an island. And she said, I don't know what I want to do, who I want to be. One look at her Instagram, I realized this woman has traveled to see more countries and more places than 99% of people will see in their life. And she works at cell phone repair, so she doesn't really make money. I said, that's a gift. You love to travel. That's your passion. You can not only be a travel blogger, but you could be a travel agent. You got a whole business that's making some people 6 figures, and you just sitting on it because you didn't realize that your passion could become your purpose. It could become a profitable business. And it also could be tied to purpose, because, and this is what you have to do, that after you identify the passion and your gifts, so to speak, and you marry the passion and the gifts, and you find profit, even if it's just making $1, then you got to give it purpose. So in her example, she would take underprivileged kids, and her foundation would raise money to take them on a trip or something like that, or abused women, when they leave that relationship, take them to a resort for 3 nights to get pampered. And so now you're making profit from your blog, from your podcast, from all your travel tips and your travel agency, but now you give it purpose to where it's doing something greater than just making money. And so that's what I would tell every person. Sit and spend time with you, because every one of us, we have natural gifts that come to us very easily that does not come to everybody else the same way. My latest book, Make It Work. Make It Work is like 250 pages. And I wrote the book in 5 days.
Wow.
And it's got 5-star reviews on Amazon. Last I checked, it was like about 100 reviews, and it's still at 5 stars. And people have been writing me from around the world, even different continents, telling me that the book is changing their life, and that they've read it a second time and going on a third time, and they got the audio book and the hardback book. And I'm blown away. But I wrote the book in 5 days. When I hear a lot of people say it took them a year or 2 years or 3 years to finish their book. I'm going away next week to write book number 2 in that particular book deal. And I'm going to write it, and I'm going to be gone 7 nights. When I come back home, the book will be done. And I have to realize that that is a gift. So what did I do with that gift? I don't have a college degree. I went to school for, I think, 8 years. For 8 years, and never finished my degree. But any degree I could have gotten at college, I earned more than that degree would have paid me, because I found my purpose and my passion. And so what I did with that ability to write a book and publish a book is I became an author consultant. For $2,500, I teach you how to write your book, how to create your outline, how to create your writing schedule, and how to self-publish your book. So $2,500, I can do 10 or 20 of those a year. Then I became a ghostwriter for $10,000. I can write 4 or 5 books a year. And so now I took that gift that comes easy to me and found a way to turn it into profit. A stream of income, to profit. And so everything that's out here, every gift, every passion that humans have can become a business. And that's what, in a very long-winded way to say, don't lose hope. Don't look down on yourself. Don't feel like you gotta, be a slave on somebody else's job. And I got a quote that went viral, and they thought it was Steve Jobs' quote. They thought it was everybody's quote. And it says, if you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to help them build theirs. And it was a little wordy at first, but the wordsmiths online took and changed it to, if you don't build your dream, someone will hire you to build theirs. And that quote, I typed it sitting in front of my job, that counselor job. And I posted it on Twitter, and my Twitter was viral at the time. And that quote went over 100 countries, went viral. I saw it on commercials. I saw PayPal using it in their marketing. And 2 other guys used it. And so it's attributed to them too, but I know where it comes from. And I say that to everybody, build your dream. It's cool to have a job. It's cool to work in your career, but create something that you can't be fired from.
Man, that's powerful, man. That's dope, man. And you dropped so much knowledge here for us today. So if someone's trying to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
TonyGaskins.com. You can hit the contact. It comes right to my phone. If you want to do coaching, I still do coaching. I try to do at least like 5 to 10 sessions a week, one-on-one coaching. And then on social media, it's Tony Gaskins everywhere. So Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I have a podcast where I answer questions from people on love and relationships, and YouTube channel. So everywhere is Tony Gaskins.
Awesome, man. And for those of you who are listening, always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it. Yo, what you think? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I want to know what you learned. So if you wouldn't mind, would you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast on your phone right now? Upload to your Instagram stories, tag me at Shawn R. Anthony _, and then let me know in that Instagram story what is one thing that you learned. I love hearing from you, my listeners, thought leaders, former or current students all around the world. Let me know, and while you're doing this, go inside the podcast app, subscribe, leave a 5-star review and a 5-star rating. Again, this helps us reach more people. And if you want to be a part of this mission, helping us change the world one person at a time, it makes a massive difference by you leaving a review. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. And remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.